Welcome, everyone, to the Progress City Radio Hour, another Town Hall episode. I'm here with my brother, Michael. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing great. Happy as always to have another Town Hall under the belt.
I know it's been a little bit since we've had one, and excited. We're kind of between two future world motifs, and we have someone who has experience with both. Michael, who are you talking to today?
Well, you're right. It's somebody who had their fingers in a lot of pies in Future World, so we could slot them in anywhere really. But I'm very excited to speak to Mr. Davy Feiten, animatronics animator extraordinaire. Really excited to talk to him because this is someone who I did not know his name growing up, but I knew him because when you look back in Disney news magazines and in Disney Channel special, Dateline Disney on for some new ride, anytime you see somebody programming an animatronic, it was usually, this guy. So I always thought of him as that's the animatronic guy. It turns out it's Davy Feiten.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he would be there. He was just everywhere on those things, and it was real cool, technology piece of what they were showing off, and they showed it off a lot.
Absolutely, and just the advances in the technology over the years, we're going to talk about him with that. But, he started off as an animator, very interesting place with some very interesting people, so we're going to talk about that, and, just what a career he's had, touching so many iconic figures. And I feel like whenever Disney has a wave of innovation, it leads with the animatronics, because you think of when the sort of A100s came out, that was a big deal. And the sort of early 90s when we started getting all these advanced figures like Timekeeper and all that new Tomorrowland stuff in 94 was very advanced. So animatronics was always a very visible way of measuring progress at Imagineering, and Davy was right there with it. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to him.
Yeah. Well, shall we go to your interview with Davy?
Absolutely. Let's hear it as we welcome Davy Feiten. Today we'd like to welcome a true master of animation, both dimensional and on screen, Mr. Davy Feiten. Davy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you.
Really glad to have you. You're a person who's probably best known for your work in the field of audio-animatronics, but you got your start as a traditional animator. What drew you to animation in the first place?
I'm not sure what drew me there. I tried several different art schools, and I didn't like anything that they presented. And the one school that I visited was Cal Arts, and I really liked their program in the Disney animation. At the time, I really knew nothing about animation. But yeah, I just didn't like the other schools, and I really liked either Art Center or Cal Arts. And I did like automotive design, but I did like animation when I started looking into it.
You were at Cal Arts at a kind of an amazing time and studied alongside, besides yourself, a lot of other notable names. What are some memories of your time there?
We were all just a bunch of friends. I mean, sometimes I'd go skiing with John Lasseter, and Joe Ranft was there, and he was always a comedian. We would dress up as clowns in the Doodah Parade together and do goofy things. One time for Halloween, we went out and stole pumpkins out of a pumpkin patch to decorate the Halloween event at Cal Arts. And he told me, I remember him saying that was like the most memorable time that I've ever had, was stealing pumpkins with Davy. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but yeah. And I mean, Tim Burton was there. I go out and have dinner with him, and we would do stuff. And Brad Bird was there, John Musker, And you go out and eat with these guys sometimes and do things around the place, but everyone was pretty studious. Tim was the same as he is now in his films as he was in Cal Arts. Like, he didn't change. He was still making this really bizarre haunted mansion type films and those strange characters that he'd come up with. But we just assumed that was Tim and he would never go anywhere.
Right. I love the old footage they've put out on, I guess it was maybe Waking Sleeping Beauty, where they had, I guess it was Lasseter's old home movies of, going and here's Tim Burton, and it's, it's clearly same old Tim Burton there working on his weird little drawings. And, I looked at your IMDb and saw that you had a credit on Vincent. Is that correct?
No, I didn't work on Vincent, although I was working for Disney at the time and knew about it. And I'd go over there and hang out and watch them. But about the only credit I got was picking up a pushpin off the floor and putting it into the wall. So that's about all I did.
Was that an exciting time to be? Because that was such an odd time for animation, because you had all this creative talent coming up in your group, but the studio itself wasn't doing so hot. Was that an exciting time, or were you guys, worried about the way things were going?
When I first started I only went to Cal Arts 2 years, and they offered me a job at the studio. And I also had a full scholarship, so I was weighing which way to go. But we all kind of didn't feel good about, the films that were coming out. It just wasn't our style. We didn't like it with all the music. I mean, we often complained about it when we'd have lunch together and, meet in the hallways or whatever. And even John Musker would, he didn't like it. And John Lasseter didn't like it. And I remember when we were at Pixar working, when I moved up there later on, even then, John Lasseter and Joe Ranft and those guys were saying, "Hey, man, we don't want to have all these songs in our film." They eventually put one song in that was added, in Toy Story 1, the first Toy Story, but that was like an afterthought, and we realized it was the best way to go, just to get the story point across real quickly.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, and it wasn't characters breaking into song. It was a song over the movie itself.
Yeah, it was a series of shots and just a song over on top of them rather than the characters singing,
right.
So they felt it was okay for that. But yeah, they specifically didn't want those songs, and they were trying to get away from the traditional Disney way of doing things.
When you came, did you work on Fox and the Hound? Is that what you worked on at the
Yeah, we started working on Fox and Hound, and I don't think anybody liked it. So, to be honest with you, I was really bored with it. I was just, that was mostly me, but I was really burnt out from the animation because I had finished an animated film at Cal Arts, and I was working day and night, 7 days a week, really killing myself trying to get this film done just so I could get a job at Disney. So I got the film done, and I got a job at Disney. But then when I went to Disney, I didn't want to do animation. I just was like, oh, I'm too burnt out. But, I eventually, showed up every day and worked. Wasn't crazy about the film. I mean, it was okay, but we just had like really way out ideas, I think, all of us, because we were all really young.
Right. You really wanted to sort of push into new things, I would assume.
Yeah, we were always playing gags on each other. That's the other thing.
Oh, yeah?
So when I was at the studio, I eventually got offered a job over at Imagineering shortly after that. And I didn't even know what Imagineering was. I mean, I knew they did something with the theme parks, but I didn't know anything about them. I went over there and they said, "Hey, we'd like to hire you, and we want you to program these audio-animatronics." And I was like, "What? You mean robots, right?" Well, we call them audio-animatronics. We don't use the word robot. I go, "Oh, so it's a robot. Okay." So they showed me, and I was really blown away. And I was just like, "Oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen." And they showed me the auctioneer for Pirates of the Caribbean, and they actually had a real one, not the one at Disneyland, a brand new one that they're going to be sending to Tokyo when they do Pirates for Tokyo.
Right.
And they made them and they had the brand new Anaconda and everything. And they sat me down. I got to play with it, and I broke it a few hundred times and caused all kinds of problems. And I thought they were going to fire me because I kept breaking everything. And they come over and say, no, we want you to break. That's the whole point of it. We want you to find all the problems with it and tell us what's breaking down and what doesn't work so we can fix it before we hire all the other animators, you know? So, yeah, and so I managed to constantly break it. But what happened is after I was there and after I broke it a few times and they had to then go back and rewrite the software because they also asked me to come up with new ideas and new ways of programming the figure. Mm-hmm. So there was little tools I realized they were missing because I kind of learned from, drawing animation, the 2D animation, exactly how to do it with in-betweens and slow in and slow out, and what they called an ease in enable button so that it wouldn't jump real quickly in one frame. You'd slowly ease in over a few frames. Mm-hmm. And you could also slow in or slow out at the end of a line or at the beginning of a line. So they created those tools and put them in. But all that stuff took time. So a lot of times they said, well, okay, we don't have anything for you for the next couple of weeks. Go do something else. So I worked in the department, in the animation department at Imagineering, where it was also the same department as special effects, right?
Okay.
And we all shared the same offices and stuff. And so we talked and chatted and stuff. And Bill Novi, he was in charge of the special effects. And he was asking me one day, do you have any idea who the guy was who did all the special effects for the big Halloween party at Cal Arts? And I go, well, that was me. He goes, oh my God, we've been trying to find you. We want to hire you. I go, well, I already work here in this department. And I go, oh my God. He turns around and goes to my boss, says, we'd like to hire him out of your department into our department. And Wathel Rogers, who was my boss, was amazing. He just said, you can borrow him, but you can't hire him permanently, right? Uh-huh. But then the word kind of got out that I was an animator and, I could do 2D drawing animation and computer animation. So they ended up putting me, they sent me back to the studio. They said, well, you're going to rotoscope. I go, rotoscope? Nobody rotoscopes anymore. He goes, yeah, but we need this for EPCOT. We're building EPCOT. And some of our ideas, we just want you to rotoscope some humans walking in the background, and they're just going to be silhouettes for, I think it was Spaceship Earth. They actually had me go back and do several of these. And I don't even know if they made it in, to the show, but I had to do all this work. Well, they sent me to the studio, and the rotoscope machine is up in the attic where the beams are in the top of the animation building. There's no sheetrock. There's no insulation. It's just this big giant room on the very top floor. And it's scary and spooky up there and dusty. And it's just the machine and a little folding chair. And I would spend day after day up there just sweating like crazy because it was miserable. And I tried to get the rotoscoping all done. Well, anyway, I got really bored one day. And they had rat traps up there and mice traps because every now and then they, get one up in the attic. Well, I got so bored they had inner mail where you could just mail to, a person in another room or another building. And one day I just caught a mouse there in one of the traps, and I put it inside a film can and taped it up, right? And then I sent it to Tim Burton, right? And I thought, oh, this is going to be funny. And Tim got it, and he cracked up laughing. He thought it was really funny. And well, he turned around and then put a little costume on the mouse. And then he sent it to some other people. I think Chris Buck was one of them who got it. John Musker got it. Brad Bird got it, and Guy Vaslovich got it, and they kept sending it around to everybody, and every single person added to the little mouse's costume.
Uh-huh.
They added little drawings in the film can, and they decorated and really made it elaborate. This kept going on for a week. By then, the mouse was smelling really bad. Well, somebody finally sent it to this really pretty girl that was an animator there. She got it, and she just screamed and ran down the hall and just threw a fit, you know. And of course, that was the end of that gag. And I called him at Eric Larson's office, like, and he's gone, oh, don't ever do that again. I was like, that was terrible. And I started to leave. He says, Jesus, that was a funny gag. I wish I thought of it. Like, it's like, but anyway, so he was kind of, Eric Larson was like cool with it, but he had to just say something like, you know, you're bad boy, don't do it again.
Yeah. Don't do it again, but it's hilarious.
Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff we would do quite often. You know, quite often do characters, and we mail them back and forth or draw them. And you had to be careful who you did a caricature of, because if it was a producer or director or someone big wig who thought they were important, or a manager, they get really mad at you if, you know, it wasn't a beautiful drawing.
Right.
Fun of them. So yeah, some people are off limits.
Which is against the point of a caricature in the first place, but whatever.
But anyway,
not meant to be pretty. Well, who brought you to WED? Was it Wathel?
yeah, he I don't remember exactly how it happened, but anyway, he had gone to CalArts and saw my animated film I did. And he goes up every year, and he needed to hire a bunch of people for, you know, to program figures for EPCOT. And he wanted to interview me, but he didn't realize that I'd already been hired by the studio and was working over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend who also worked at Imagineering, and they had recommended me and so forth. So anyway, I went over and saw Wathel Rogers, and, you know, they showed me the figure and all that, and they really liked me, and they offered me a job, right? And I accepted the job. And it was really awkward because Eric Larson didn't want me to leave. He thought that was because they had already put a lot of time into trying to develop me and stuff. And I didn't see it being a problem because it was the same company, really.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah, but there was, I don't know if I should say his name, I probably shouldn't, but anyway, an HR person hadn't interviewed me. So they did it incorrectly. Wathel met with me, he and Jack Taylor, they liked me, they agreed to hire me. And the HR person got really upset that he didn't have a chance to interview me. So he interviewed me, and he started asking me all these trick questions. And I like, huh, what? And he's like, well, do you want to be a director if we offer you a director's job? I said, I don't care. I was like, I'm just here for the animation job. But what if we offer you a job as a director? I said, yeah, sure. If that's what you want to give me, that's fine. But we already agreed on an animation job. Yes, but if you want to be a director, tell me now. So it was kind of tricky question, and I didn't understand what was going on, but he was trying to trick me. And so he didn't hire me because he claimed that to Wathel that I wanted to be a director and not an animator.
That's so weird.
It was really bizarre. So I went back to Wathel and talked to him about it and explained, and then they argued about it, he and the HR person, and they worked it out, and then they said, well, we changed our mind, you can come work here. Because part of it was Bill Novi, who was in special effects, wanted to hire me. And so he kind of added to fuel to the fire, say, hey, well, we'll take them.
Right.
So, you know, but so yeah, so then they brought me in, and boy, the first thing they did over there was there was a guy named Yale Gracie. Yale was the king of special effects. He was really, really good. And he was an older guy and ready to retire. And Bill was in charge of the department. They wanted me to work with Yale Gracie, and I heard of him, but I didn't know anything about him. And they kind of took me aside and says, well, you know, Yale has a really sharp temper and will get mad at you for no reason. All right. So don't let it get to you. He does that to everybody. It's just part of working with him. I said, okay. So they were mocking up at the Tahunga building, which is the new building that Disney purchased to do all this EPCOT stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was right by the airport. And I was one of the first people over there with Yale to mock up special effects for EPCOT. And mostly what I was doing was these 10 by 10 projectors of different effects, fire effects, snow effects, rain effects, the sun rising up and going down. And we're working on every single pavilion, some type of effect for everyone. So I probably had 10, 15, 10 by 10 projectors and different artwork that I was putting on. And you have this big plexiglass disc and it rotates and I have to project it onto a wall.
Okay.
What Yale didn't drive, and I don't know what happened, whether he never learned how or he got his license taken away. I have no idea, but for some reason he didn't drive, so I had to drive him all the time. And so I would go over there at Tahunga, do all this work, and then at the end of the day, I'd have to go back to WDI and pick him up and bring him and show him the effects, and then take him back to Imagineering, right? And boy, if you didn't do everything right, drive correctly, make the right turn signal, turn at the right spot, have your effects all done, he'd get really mad at you just for the stupidest reason. And that was really hard to take. Anyway, what I was getting to was that the building was infested with black widows everywhere. I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds of them. And I had all these 10 by 10 projectors on the floor and all these extension cords running to them. And there was no tables. There was one folding chair for me to sit on, and that was it. and there was 5 other guys, and they worked at the far end of the building, the other end, mostly mocking things up, the wood shop area and, putting up shelves, getting the bathrooms ready before they started bringing everyone over to start, building EPCOT. And we all complained about the black widows, and you had to be really careful because you reel up your extension cord and there'd be one every 2 feet on the cord.
No.
You have to flick it off, and then a couple more feet, and then you'd find another one. You'd be careful about sitting on the toilet or sitting in your folding chair if there might be one on there or under it. It was horrible. So then one day, 2 of us out of the 6 people both got bit by black widows. Fortunately, it wasn't me. And then they kicked us all out of there and they fumigated the whole building. And we couldn't go in until they got rid of all the black widows. And then after that, it was fine. So
it's the hazards of Imagineering.
Yeah. And I don't know. What other story you want to know?
Well, I wondered, you start off, how did you learn about animating, just the nuts and bolts of animating an animatronic? In old photos, all my life, like as a kid, I got like Disney News. I'd always see pictures of you sitting at this console with, the human figure on it or whatever, and, working at this console. How did the system work at that point in time? How did you learn how to do that?
Waithel kind of went over it with me, but because they use a very similar Anaconda. It was a white one that everybody drew on. And by the way, Waithel made it very clear that I was not allowed to draw on the Anaconda any cartoon characters. It's okay if Bill Justice does it, but I am not allowed. Okay. And I thought, oh, that's so unfair. So I never drew on it, because they made that really clear, and it's almost like we're going to fire you if we catch you drawing on it. So I never did. But most of it was I taught myself. And I mean, Waithel explained to me, we'll start off with doing the mouth first, because then you'll start memorizing all the dialogue once you get the mouth all in sync. And then you go on to the head move, the head nod, head turn, head tilt. And from that, you then add the torso moves, from that, then you add possibly the body moves down at the base, or you do all the arm moves and start adding one arm at a time. And there's usually about 7 functions per arm. And you kind of would mock it up, pre-plan it, knowing what arm moves you're going to have where on what line. So sometimes I would write out all the lines and kind of think it out. Say, okay, I want an arm move on this line or one on that line. And start thinking about what kind of arm move that I want. And then where do I go from there? So if I go out here with an arm move, I have to bring it back at some point. And I then may go out with this, or then I may go out with both arms. So you had to plot out and try and figure it out. And the hard part is you had to think about all the moves that are related. So if you're doing a head turn, you also have to think about the torso twist that also turns the body. And then you have a body twist that also turns it. In a torso side bend can kind of turn it. The torso side bend can be in sync with the head tilt. So all of those things kind of interact together. So you had to think ahead of time how far you could turn the head turn, because knowing that you're going to have to add the torso twist later in the body twist and turn it even more. In the beginning, I always turned it too far, and I would have to completely redo the head turn all over again because I just turned it too far around, and it wasn't looking to the audience or looking where you wanted. And a lot of times you get up afterwards and you'd stand in the background and or where the audience is and look to see if eye contact with the figure is made with the audience. It's really easy to get the eyes off where the figure is looking up at the ceiling or down at the floor, not at the audience. So you always had to correct that and fix it. And I started learning tricks with it after a while, how to punctuate words by snapping the head nod down on specific words so it would read from a distance. And I did that a lot of times in American Adventure and Lincoln and main figures where they're on a stage to really punctuate it. And the same thing with the hand motion. And after a while, you start learning that you don't want to put a hand motion in for every single line. Every now and then, you just want to not move the arms at all. If you want the facial features, like if you have cheek or lip moves that are really interesting and appealing, those will not show up if all the other arms are moving. So you have to basically not move any arms, any fingers, any hands if you want to show all the facial features, like any kind of muscles are twitching. The newer figures started having a lot of muscle interaction in the face and lip moves. And those would read really well, but they would not read at all as soon as you started adding arm moves in there.
Right.
Arm moves overpowered it.
Right. Were you, at this point, was everything recorded on like reel-to-reel tape? How were you storing like these commands?
We had a reel-to-reel tape machine next to us just to play the soundtrack, which was irritating because you had to rewind it each time. But it had, so every time you had to go back and do another pass and do it again, you'd have to rewind that tape. And then they had to be in sync and start at the same time. So there was a time code that was on the computer mixed in with the tape. So you, everything was always in sync that way. Yeah, as for the computer, it was just a time code that was playing, and you could see it on the machine where it was, for what frame you're on.
So aside from just the animation itself, I mean, your job grew so far beyond that to, staging figures and staging them within the attraction and, a whole other sort of array of things. Aside from Wathel, is there anyone else you learned from about like how to stage an animated scene, how to stage a scene in a show?
Yeah, I mean, as you work on this, all these shows, you really start learning from it because you're constantly studying it. You're trying to improve it as much as possible. And I think one of the reasons why I really improved because I was always practicing. when other people were, waiting, they're fixing something else or doing something, I'd sit at the console and I would try different techniques and different ways of doing something and combining functions to create a certain type of arm motion or a certain personality. And at the same time, I started working with the directors of every show, and especially Wathel Rogers taught me this a lot. And then eventually Mark Davis taught me even more. Mark Davis was like the very best as for staging. And when I worked with Ward Kimball on World of Motion, he was always talking about staging because the figures really didn't move that much in that show. They were really limited. So staging had to be, spot on perfect, because you just basically read it as a stage scene.
Mm-hmm.
And working in Pirates of the Caribbean was another good example, learning how to stage really well. So from all those guys, I started learning techniques of how to do it, how to spread the feet apart, how to have them at the right angle to where the viewer is passing by on the boat or walking by or viewing it on stage. After a time, I started learning that when you build a figure, you have to build the figure correctly before it even gets to the animator. And Wathel was really good at that. He would go through, and meet with everyone in Mapo and position the legs just right and position the arms and make sure the anatomy was always correct. And I started picking up on all of that. But where I think I really learned is from Mark Davis, because I had the ability to go in and look at his artwork all the time. Mm-hmm. Bear Band was a great example when I worked on that, and Pirates of the Caribbean working on it. And American Adventure, he was like the very best at staging, and just his poses were just amazing. And when it got to the point when I did Splash Mountain at Disneyland, they asked me to completely restage that whole show because it was so poorly done in the first time they did it. And it was just a complete mess. And I told them I wouldn't work on the show, I wouldn't animate it because I didn't like it. It was horribly done. And Bruce and Tony said, hey, whatever you want to do, if you want to restage it, tear out all the figures, have at it. We'll support you 100%. And they did. And I said, the first thing I want to do is I want to throw 10 figures away out of Splash Mountain, and because they make no sense. And I want to move almost all the figures and restage them and group them so that they read to the audience better. That meant changing all the lighting, changing the speakers, rerunning all the wires to the cabinets. I really thought everyone would hate my guts, for doing that. But
I'd say it made you real popular with the estimators.
Well, yeah, it wasn't just the estimators and the cost, but it was the maintenance crew that had to do all that work, and the lighting people and the sound. When everyone saw what I was doing and they really liked it, like nobody got on my case about it. They just, okay, yeah, he's fixing it. Because nobody liked it the first time they saw it. It just looked awful. So, yeah, we really fixed it up and really improved it. Then they carried all those stage improvements to, Splash Mountain in Florida and Tokyo. And Joe, who's the director of Splash for those, he basically let me, do whatever I needed. And we worked really well together, and we knew each other from CalArts. So that turned out really good. But the first one was tough.
So how did you improve? I mean, those are such, the different Splash Mountains are such beloved, legendary experiences. How did you plus it up for Florida once you had a chance to have another go at it?
We added figures. We want to add a lot of rabbit figures, so the story made sense. And we wanted to. I started learning over time how to put what I call free animation by putting props in the figure's hand, so the fingers didn't look so stiff, and the fingers wouldn't look as stiff if you had them holding a fishing pole, or if they had, a guitar in their hand or something like that. They just looked so much more alive. And if you, whenever you saw a figure that didn't have any props in their hand, they always looked too stiff. So a lot of times I added little props or little techniques, as well as things that would just dangle and swing and move around, like something on the end of a fishing pole, like a boot or a fish or something like that. Would add a lot of free movement and without an actuator. And that just added more life to the figure. So we started doing all those little things to Splash for Tokyo and Splash for Florida. And Joe was really good artist and really good at staging. So he was a step ahead of me. And I came up with a few other ideas. One was this hopping rabbit. And Joe really liked the hopping rabbit idea. And we never even attempted to do something like that with the animatronics. So, I showed him and said, hey, I think this will work. And we ended up putting it in. And it was pretty cool. People look at it and go, wow, how the heck did they do that? And we added a bunch of cool rabbit scenes so the story just worked better and flowed better. And the other thing is we started putting in is I learned how to put pauses in between scenes. So there's actually nothing. So you'd go from seeing a really nice scene about geese and you go around a turn and there'd be nothing but maybe rocks and trees. There would be no figures. And you could create kind of a sound barrier and a light barrier so that as you went into the next scene, it wouldn't move all that light and sound into the next scene and wash it out and disturb it. So I started learning how to create these walls, so to speak, to cut off the sound, cut off the light for the next scene. So the scenes were more separated, but not just for visually to help control the sound bleed and the light bleed.
Right. Yeah, and it worked beautifully. Well, you mentioned American Adventure before, and that is such a massive show, such a technological achievement. It's 40 years on now, and it's still just incredibly impressive thing to watch happen. What was it like working on that show?
Well, first of all, it's just a great show, and we could tell it was a great show from just as soon as we were in the theater, just seeing everything. But man, it was really complicated, and I really had to be the best of my game when it came to programming those figures, because some of them are really hard to do. Ben Franklin walking was really difficult. Mm-hmm. Some of the characters on the scenes, Susan B. Anthony could catch her hand inside the railing. Same with Mark Twain. And Will Rogers with a rope, it physically wouldn't work the first few times I programmed. I actually said, well, Dave, just do the rope tricks yourself. Just program it. And I go, hey, I know nothing about rope tricks. I can't do that. I go, no. You'll figure it out. Just do the rope tricks. And I couldn't do it. So we came back and we added a wire inside the rope to help hold the shape. And from that, we were able to then control the rope well enough to where I could start twirling it around and make it look like he was doing rope tricks with it.
That was one of my questions, because I've always wondered how in the world you were able to program that, because the rope tricks, because it's an amazing thing to see happen, even today. And I'd always wondered just how do you program something like that?
Yeah. And there's effects that are sometimes tied in, like Thomas Jefferson, and he was sitting behind a desk, and I kept catching his hand on the desk. It was antique desk, but I really wanted to just get a saw up there and cut part of the desk out, the part that you didn't see, so that I could not hit his hand on there, because I kept breaking it. And the same with Susan B. Anthony. I catch her hand on the railing, and FDR, the same problem. The hand was on the podium when he gave his speech. But boy, if you slipped up just slightly, or one function stopped working, the hand would get caught on that podium or railing, and it would break something.
Oh, wow.
or the arm would slip in the shaft here, and then it was really difficult to try and reline up the arm, and then you have to fix the broken, lines inside of it, and you could create a mess that took hours to fix. So you had to be really, really careful. And after a while, I started learning tricks and techniques, and basically take the desk away from Thomas Jefferson and just take it away, right?
Right.
Just have him up there without the desk, do all the programming, get it just how you want it, and then just put the desk back in. And I learned that my lesson when I was doing Gomer on the piano on the Country Bears.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is like I kept catching his paws on the piano and breaking them. And I finally just moved the piano out of the way and then programmed it. And sometimes I would take blue tape and I'd put tape across marking the height of exactly where the piano was or where Thomas Jefferson's desk was, or I put cardboard up, something like that, so that if I did hit it, I would just damage the cardboard or tape. And until I got it just right, and then you could remove all that and put the prop back in.
So I guess those figures can do some real damage if you're not careful.
Yeah, we had some funny stories at American Adventure. Is we had a ghost, so we called it. And what happened is we started working night shift because during the day they had to have all this construction crew in there, working on the building, and we just couldn't work at the same time. So for programming, we switched over to a night shift, while the construction crews were all inside the building or underneath the carriage and so forth like that. Because you couldn't have any construction crews in there or you could hurt them or run over them with a carriage or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was really a dangerous situation. So you wanted to be safe all the time. So when we were working at night, we suddenly started having this problem where the figure would start like moving around really sporadic, like, it was possessed. And, start twitching really weird and spinning its head around and doing all these weird things. And everyone go, Davy, stop doing that. And I go, hey, I'm not even touching the Anaconda. I'm not doing that. And it's like, stop it. You're going to break the figure. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And we kept having the same problem right around midnight. And then it would start off with Will Rogers, I think was the first one who had this problem. And then Susan B. Anthony, and then George Washington had it. And nobody could figure out what was causing it. We all thought it was some kind of ghost because it was always at midnight. Mm-hmm. Then somebody had this theory, they're testing at the monorail system at midnight every night. It must be sending some type of electronic signal through the air, causing these figures to move. And nobody believed that, but that was one of the theories. And then they realized, wait a second, right at midnight is when the security guard always shows up and he's got his radio going and maybe his walkie-talkie is sending interference through the cabinet somehow. And he's causing the figures to twitch. And so they ruled that one out too. Wow. So they kept coming back to me as if it was my fault, but it wasn't me. And there were times I actually would move back like 5 rows and not sit at the Anacon around midnight, and it would start happening. And I go, hey, look, I'm not even by the Anacon. I'm not over there. Stop me.
Yeah.
So they couldn't figure this out. And I have pictures of this somewhere. They actually picked us all out of there, and they disconnected all these cables to the figures that ran to the cabinets, and they realized that it was wired incorrectly. And they had to rewire all these main wires, and they were really long because they had to run all the way from the cabinets all the way to the figure on these carriages. So have a picture of these cables just running all along the floor at American Adventure as they're trying to rewire and figure this whole thing out. But once they rewired it, the ghost went away, and we never had a problem like that again.
Wow. That is bizarre. But I would imagine with these complicated systems and, everything was all these computer systems were new and all this technology was new, I imagine there were just so many bugs you had to work out in the system. Especially, you were talking about running these cables. Like eventually, weren't they running from, DAX, like Computer Central was on the other side of the park, on the other side of the lagoon. I'm sure that caused a lot of problems.
Yeah, I was actually really lucky. I had Eric Swap as my technical support person.
Oh.
That guy was really brilliant, and he could just hunt down and solve any problem. And so whenever he was fixing some problem, I would lay down on the floor and take a nap until he came back from DAX.
That's always good.
Try and get 15 minutes of sleep while he's hunting down a problem. And he would go back to DAX, reboot the computer, find out what the problem is, or he'd go pull cards out of the cabinet and find the card that was shorting out and replace the card or whatever. And we constantly had to retune and readjust the figure for functions if something got off or messed up, because it had to be really precise, the tuning of the gain, stroke, and offset, which were these little knobs on the card, which controlled each function to have the right speed and the right range of motion. Because if you got off on that and started running the figure, and it wasn't, the stroke and offset were not in the right place, then the figure would then, hit, Thomas Jefferson would then hit the table, or Ben Franklin wouldn't walk right, or Susan B. Anthony would hit her hand against the railing. So those couldn't be off at all. Yeah, they had to be really precise. But we constantly ran into, issues, first time, all kinds of little bugs came up. Everything from the Anacon to wiring to the cabinets to DAX. But, the crew was really good. They figured it out. They always solved it. And I got to take lots of naps while I was waiting.
So I guess you were working, that was Rick Rothschild, right? Who was working on American Adventure, right?
Yeah, Rick was pretty good to work with. He was really intelligent and really knowledgeable about what needed to be done. He didn't get in our way. He always supported us. He was really good to work with. I felt bad one day. He split his chin open and got a bunch of stitches. And I felt it was my fault, but it wasn't. I made a big deal with Rick and the crew is not to sit right next to me because I have to concentrate. And I usually have headphones on, and I'm trying to get everything perfectly in sync. And I don't want someone sitting next to me writing and doing things and talking and chatting and so forth, and their walkie-talkies going off. So I'd always make sure everyone's sat far away from me, and they all kind of knew to do this. Because if you mess up, I have to start over and try and redo that whole section all over again if someone interrupts me. Well, anyway, I made Rick sit a few rows back, and he had to get something off of my desk. And he was climbing over the chairs real fast, and he slipped and fell and hit his chin on the chair and split it open. And he came in the next day with stitches. And anyway,
you got to be careful out there.
Bad for him. So.
Well, I'd imagine the potential for injury. I mean, with that enormous machine that's backstage at that show, there was all sorts of potential for danger there. It's such a massive apparatus.
Well, one day I had to program, I think it was all the mouth programming. And there is I think that's what I was doing. Or maybe it was Will Rogers with the rope. But I moved, normally when we're programming, the Anacon was on a piece of plywood that we mocked up. It was center of the stage. Center of the audience seats. Mm-hmm. Dead center and halfway up. And you can do, the basic animation, but every now and then, if you had to program the mouth or, program Will Rogers' rope or something like that, I moved the Anacon onto the stage on a little 4x4 table, folding table, and had a folding chair. But I'd be working 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'd be the only one there. or me and Eric, right? So when I was working, Eric would lay down on the floor and he would take a nap. And if I broke something or something stopped working correctly and he had to fix it, then I would take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this day I was sitting there 3 or 4 in the morning trying to do some mouth programming, and Eric fell asleep right next to me, right? But I was right on the edge of the stage where one step forward and you'd go right off the stage down where all the carriages are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Eric was right next to me, and he started rolling over to the point where he's going to roll off the stage. I would quickly, all of a sudden, like kick him with my foot and step on him, and he'd get really mad at me and like shove my foot away and try and roll over, and I'd kick him again, wake him up, and then we went back and forth, and this went on for like 30, 40 minutes. He kept asking me to stop doing that. I said, but you're going to kill yourself. You're going to roll off the stage. I can't have that. He doesn't realize I saved his life, but yeah, he almost got killed from doing that. And we'd be so tired and exhausted that, it's hard to work all night and then go home at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd fall asleep at the wheel driving home, or you just were delirious. So,
where were you staying on site in Florida? Where did they have you put up?
We're in the campground where they had the trailers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One day we were in, Eric and I were working in World of Motion, and that was the first show that we worked on. And it didn't have air conditioning in the beginning, and it was in the middle of summer, and it's just boiling hot. And he and I were just sweating like crazy. And it was the first show, and Wathel and Jack wouldn't buy us a table. We just thought that was the stupidest thing. You're spending $1 billion on EPCOT, and we don't have a table for the Anacon, right? And we had no folding chair. And Wathel says, "Oh, we'll just stand. Here, just take the Anacon and just set it on that smelly trash can over there and work from that." The steel drum. And that's what we did for about a month. And we then have to roll the steel drum from scene to scene and set the Anacon. And I would have to stand there all day, never getting to sit down, sweating like crazy, trying to program these figures because they wouldn't give me a chair and they wouldn't give me a table. And finally, Eric said, "Screw this." And he just got all pissed off once. And then he went down to, I don't know what it was, Walmart or Kmart or one of those. And he bought 2 folding tables, card tables, and he bought some folding chairs. One for me and him, and one for, I think, Doug Griffith for their group too. Because we all had the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that was so stupid. Well, anyway, because it was so hot, they started running the air conditioner in the evening, right? And we didn't like working when all the construction crews were in the way because they were constantly bothering you, and they're making all kinds of noise. They're walking by in front of you. They're trying to move tools and supplies. And they constantly want to ask you questions, and they want you to run the show for them. And you just didn't have time to put up with these construction workers,
Mm-hmm.
because it was all day long. There's 1,000 of them in the building. So we'd switch over to night shift and try and program the figures then. And then when we did that, we got air conditioning. We thought, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
So we'd work all night till 8 in the morning. One day, we're getting toward the very last scene in World of Motion. We're working somewhere, and we had to then move the Anacon and that little folding table and the folding chair and all the extension cords and everything to the very last scene, or one of the very last scenes. And so we moved it there, and none of the vehicles are running, right? But they were testing cars, and they're testing the vehicles, and ride operators were practicing learning how to, do their spiel and run the cars and turn them on and off and all that. And they were supposed to give us a warning when they did that so that we would be out of their way and we didn't get, hurt. So we moved all this equipment down the track. We had to go back to get a couple little things, and all of a sudden we heard, "Okay, we're starting up the system. Vehicles will be running in 5 seconds." It's like we're away at the other scene, and we start running back to get back to it, but we thought where we put all the equipment was out of the way, and it was sitting on top of the table. Turns out we forgot that those vehicles actually swing the back end around like in Haunted Mansion, and they started running. They swung around, and they caught just the corner of the table and knocked out the leg of it, and the Anacon and everything slid down in the track and just chewed up the Anacon and cut off all the buttons and chewed up all the extension cords. It was a complete disaster. And
I mean, how expensive was one of those Anacons at that point? How much?
$65,000-$70,000, I think. And
Holy cow!
I thought for sure I was fired. I thought that was the end of the world. I thought,
I bet.
And so, it was clearly an accident, but I went and woke up Jack Taylor at 8 a.m. at his trailer and told him what happened. He and Wathel, and they weren't real happy, but they just said, go to your trailer and go to sleep. They got us another Anacon fallen down, and they sent that one back to be repaired. And I think they eventually got it all working again, but it took a while.
I'd imagine that's one of those moments where time slows down, like as you're watching this sort of slowly happen.
Yeah, you got to realize you're going on no sleep,
right?
And you work all night, and not to make a mistake, and mistakes can happen.
Well, you mentioned World of Motion. On the last episode of our show, we talked about World of Motion, what a massive show it was from just the sheer number of audio animatronics. How did you handle programming that many figures?
I don't. That was the first show that I actually started working on, I think, and we started locking it up at the Hunger Building and programming. And I think the balloon scene was the very first scene that I did. Ford Kimball was the art director on it, and he kept me going because he was always cracking jokes on me and pulling some fancy jokes. He was a complete comedian.
Oh yeah.
I just never stopped with gags. And he was always pulling gags on me. He thought this was always fun to do. And I usually wasn't in the mood. But like one day he came in with a zipper undone. And he had a really long tie that I don't know where he got the tie, but it was twice as long as a normal tie. And it goes down out through a zipper hanging down in between his legs down to his knee. Right? He comes in acting like there's nothing wrong. He's dressed normal. And I go, Ward, what the hell are you doing? It's like, you pull your pants up and put your zipper back up. It's like people work here, You can't be doing it. He goes, Dave, you don't get it. This is the gag. You're supposed to laugh. I'm not laughing, Ward. That's not funny. But it was a gag like that all the time. And transportation, a lot of times I didn't quite get what the gag was about. And there was a stagecoach scene where there was kind of like a banker guy, bald-headed guy who stuck his head out the window, and they had Indians attacking or whatever, and he had an arrow in his hat, and it was into the wagon, right? And he was supposed to then lower himself down and then raise back up as if he didn't even realize that his hat got shot off, right? And it stuck into. And for some reason, I didn't get that gag. I had to keep asking Ward, what's going on here? Because I got to program this. How do you want this? And he's like, Dave, it's the gag. You got to get the gag, man. It was like, so he would explain to me exactly how it's supposed to go. But every scene was that way, and the same thing where they had characters with different wheels holding them, and one was a triangle wheel, and one was a round wheel, and one was a square. And I go, come on, Ward, nobody's that stupid. Everyone can see that a triangle is not going to turn. It's like, no, Dave, these are the gags. You got to have these gags in here. It's like, and I realized the whole show was that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
a real, you can definitely see his influence throughout that whole show.
Yeah. But he was a fun guy to work with. Really good at staging.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good.
It's interesting because he, unlike a lot of other like ex-animators like Mark Davis, people had come over to WED earlier, but he had kind of stayed in animation. He really hadn't done a lot of Imagineering work. So it's always interesting to me that he finally got his chance to work in that sort of mode.
Yeah, I don't know how he got that job or what. They're probably looking for somebody skilled. As I worked there more and more, I didn't realize how talented all these people were. I just started to go, wow, this guy Mark Davis is really amazing, and Ward is amazing. Exitensio was amazing, and Sam McKinn just blew me away with his artwork. And Frank Armitage and people like that. And there's so many artists and they're so good. I thought, I will never be this good of an artist. I was like, these people are just so amazing. And one funny thing is Sam McKinn started getting to know me and kept asking for my help. And on American Adventure and other shows. And for some reason, he thought I was a model. I don't know why he thought that. He just, hey, look, he called up Waylon Rogers and goes, hey, I need to borrow Davy to model some clothes. I need some dead guys in the George Washington scene. I need him to dress up and play dead. and Waylon goes, yeah, he's not doing anything. Yeah, go ahead, go over there. It's like, I go, wait, do I get paid anything extra? No. Maybe we'll let you have a donut. But yeah, I dressed up in all these clothes, and they had my size and everything. And a lot of those scenes in American Adventure, that was me as playing all these different people.
Really?
And Sam would, just pose me in a certain scene out in the parking lot always, usually. On cardboard boxes or just on the pavement. And, or they'd set up some mock log or something like that. And I could recognize myself in a lot of the scenes, but they eventually, what's the cowboy museum that's right down the street from WDI?
Oh, the Autry?
Yeah, the Autry. They had me pose for a big mural in there.
Really?
And, yeah, so that one's real obvious. So some of my friends have teased me about that, but it just looked like a frontier guy with a rifle and clothes and so forth. But
well, you had the name, so they figured.
I guess so, but yeah, they used me for a lot of stuff. And when the American Adventure had a miniature American Adventure model. Okay. That I don't know if you ever saw. It was pretty cool, where all the carriages actually moved and the sets went up and down and the curtains closed. Cool. It was all had programmed lighting. All of it was programmed, and they were, when I first started working there, they were actually just trying to build it all. And this really smart guy, Mark Miller, who was like amazing car mechanic, who could build anything, I ended up working as his assistant building this American Adventure model. And he would, while I'm waiting for this, the auctioneer to be ready and the Anacon to be fixed and all of that, so I can start programming, they would have me work building this miniature model. And Mark would say, "Oh, well, you're going to mill out all the parts for it." And I go, "Hey, I don't know how to run any of these machines." "Oh, I'm just going to teach you. You're going to learn today." And he would teach me how to use all these power tools and all these huge machines and mill out all these metal parts and cams and so forth. I had to make every one of those for that American Venture model. And then he'd start assembling it all. And surprisingly, it all worked. And, it was pretty cool. But I never expected that to be part of my job.
No, that's amazing. I've never seen that. Was that just to pitch the attraction, or?
It was a sales pitch to try and get investors to invest in, their pavilion, and, it had a slideshow in it and the sets went up and down. And it was actually a very cool model. And sometimes I would have to just run it for whoever the guest was coming in to see. They also had 3 heads of, I think, American Adventure, and they had a little spiel of the 3 heads, and it was Ben Franklin and Mark Twain, and I forget who the third person was.
Will Rogers was the
Will
third.
Rogers, yeah. Right? They interacted and talked, but it was just, animatronic heads.
That's interesting.
That was pretty much already done and working when I first started there, but the American Adventure model wasn't. I had to help build that.
Would the heads just kind of spiel about what the attraction was going to be? Was that kind of the
deal? They're just talking and talking about American Adventure and some of the dialogue lines that are in the show.
Interesting.
Yeah. There was a horrible event once. There's this guy who was an artist, who was a young guy, who was doing all the backgrounds for American Adventure. And there was several different scenes in it. And he had to paint on glass, and it was multi-plane. So he had to do several different planes and paint all of it on glass. And so it might be 3 to 5 rows of glass for, the George Washington scene, Valley Forge scene, and there are some other ones. Really time consuming. When I was building the American Adventure model, he was like right next to me painting those scenes. And, I'd always be watching him, and it was like, "Oh man, you're really good." It was like, I don't know where you have the patience for all this. It was really tedious work trying to paint on glass to create this multi-plane effect. Well, anyway, he got all done with the very last one, and they gave it to someone to ship over to the studio to film it all. And for some reason, they gave it to some guy in shipping that was like 18 years old or whatever. He had just started, and he didn't tie anything down. And he took off in the truck and went around the turn. And as soon as he left WDI, the whole glass thing fell over, and it shattered all the artwork, all the pieces of glass, destroyed all of it. And he wanted to quit. And Mike wanted to quit. He was really upset, and it was horrible. I felt so bad for this guy, and he had to repaint that entire scene, all those glass panes. And I had to work right next to him, and he was like bitter and angry like every minute. And I was like, I felt so sorry for the guy. I mean, he just didn't deserve that.
That's brutal. Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the Ben Franklin. You mentioned before the Ben Franklin. And this was such a big deal. I mean, I remember when the pavilion opened, like on every TV special, it would be like, Ben Franklin, he walks. It was such a big deal. How did you go about doing that? Were there sort of unique challenges in making that happen?
Yeah, it was pretty complicated because it was a combination of moves and trying to get him to the right speed. And I hurt one guy once accidentally, and I don't think he ever forgave me about that. But when I was working on Ben Franklin, and we realized that, a lot of this was experimental. We had a rough idea, but we really didn't know. In this case, Ben Franklin's cane kept getting caught. Mm-hmm. So we had to remake the cane so it was like a breakaway folding cane, right? So that if it did get caught, it would flex and bend down at the bottom, rather than, it wasn't a real cane, in other words. Mm-hmm. Right? the same principle with, the rope for Will Rogers. We had to recreate that and do it differently by putting a wire in the rope. The Ben Franklin is, we couldn't quite get some things right, so we actually added props in front of them to hide some little bit of segments. So I started working with Rick Rothschild of how to hide it and what we could do and put in place, so that some of the track and lifting up his foot and making that look real was it was hard to hit it precisely. And if it had compliance today, we probably could do it exactly, but it was a little slow and sluggish and didn't quite want to go the speed that I wanted it to go to look more human-like. So we had to compensate and get around that. But yeah, the cane was difficult in that track. But one day there was a maintenance guy who took care of the hydraulics and changing the valves and things like that. And I had asked them to go down to change some of the valves that were sticky and not working properly, because they had to work really correctly. And some of those valves, if they got sticky, the actuator could kind of jump like this, right? Mm-hmm. With jittery, where you just wanted it to be nice and smooth. So every now and then you'd have to swap them out and find one that works better. Well, I didn't realize he was underneath the carriage, and I had gone to the bathroom or gone for lunch, and I came back and I thought he was all done. And I went to go work on Ben Franklin. I turned it on and I forgot to look underneath the carriage, and he was down there, and I hit him right between the legs, right where it counts, with the cane, I think it was. Oh
no.
He never liked me again after that. And it was my fault. I mean, I was supposed to check, and I didn't, but you learn the hard way, I guess.
I never thought of Ben Franklin the same way again after that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing the Hopping Rabbit on Splash, Deborah Short was doing it for Splash for Tokyo. And she messed up, and I went over, because I learned my lesson on Ben Franklin, and I never forgot it. And I remember going over with Deborah Short and explaining to her, hey, you got to be really alert when you're working on this rabbit, and you don't mess up and do things in the wrong order. You have to have ease and enable on, so it slowly goes back when you reset it to 0, as you're programming it, because you don't want it to jump back in 1/30th of a frame, or it's going to go flying back to 0 through the whole track. It could hurt somebody, or it could break the figure. Mm-hmm. And one day she just got people interrupting her and constantly around asking questions and interfering. And that was one of the dangers of having a lot of people around you bugging you while you're trying to program. And she didn't put the ease and enable on, and went back to 0, and it flew back as fast as it could and broke the figure and damaged a bunch of stuff.
Oh no!
And they had to, rebuild it and fix it all. But she was in tears, and I didn't want to say I told you so, but it's like I understood where she was coming from, because I was in that same boat with Ben Franklin. I made the same mistake. Mm-hmm. And I knew what happened when too many people are bugging you and interfering you, and you can't concentrate, So, yeah, I can relate to, and I couldn't punish her for anything. It's just one of the horrible things about that job is you don't have the privacy in the quietness that you really would like to have.
Yeah, because it's a meticulous thing you're having to do, and you gotta, as one little mistake and you wreck the figure, so that's no good.
So I forget, somebody told me it's like going into a recording booth where you're recording a song with like a famous musician or band, right? It's like you would never, ever walk into the recording booth and start talking to the musician while they're recording live in the booth. Nobody would ever do that.
No.
The exact same thing with animatronics, is you're recording live, And it's like, so why are all these people coming up and bugging you? One guy, one day on the energy pavilion, while I was working on the dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs walking, this big brontosaurus or apatosaurus, whatever they called it. I was trying to do that, and this construction worker suddenly just comes out of nowhere in a hard hat and vest and everything, stands right in front of me and says, "Hey, I'm talking to you." I go, "Hey man, I'm programming here. Get out of my way. I can't see." He's like, "Hi, hey, I bet you can make that dinosaur do a tap dance. If I give you $5, you make that dinosaur do a tap dance. Come on, I'll give you $5 right now." And I go, "Get the hell out of here." He's like, "Please, I'm working. We're recording live. The red light's on." And he wouldn't leave me alone. So he went and told all of his construction buddies that I was making the dinosaur do a tap dance. And 5 minutes later, 10 construction workers come in. "Hi, I hear you making the dinosaur do a tap dance. Come and see it." I go, "No, you can't. I'm not doing that." And they go, "Well, he's a real ass. He won't even show us the shows." They would leave and they would tell 20 more people, and then they'd show up 10 minutes later. "Oh, we hear you making the dinosaur do a tap dance." This would go on all day, that same day. It never stopped the whole day. It just got more and more construction workers all wanting to see the show. Wow.
Strangely enough, we are not having the dinosaur tap dance. That's not in the actual show. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I could see that would be frustrating. But, for Universal Energy, you got, as you say, you got to work with these really massive animatronic dinosaurs. Aside from the tap dancing, that must have been pretty cool.
They were so big and heavy that they were a little too slow for me. But
oh yeah,
they were cool looking. I really wanted to work on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I really like dinosaurs and stuff. I didn't like the track layout where it was like a big cement, field with all these vehicles riding on it. It wasn't the same feeling like you got at Pirates, where you're in a nice cozy boat and you felt like you're really there in their world. Where here you felt like you're on, a giant tram, and it didn't quite feel right. Those big cars that they had. But the dinosaurs look great and they're fun. I wish it was a water ride instead of this big cement, track.
Mm-hmm.
But I meant to tell you this one story, and I've been rehearsing it for a while. And I was really like, should I say this story or not? Because I might insult somebody. And it may be where you have to cut this out. I don't know.
All right.
But this really happened, and no one's going to ever believe it, but this really happened. Is on an American Adventure, a lot of times we'd be in American Adventure and it would be freezing cold. And I'm not sure why, because they had all the doors open. They're running the air conditioner, but it was running full blast to where it felt like it was 32 degrees in there. And I would have to wear like a ski jacket and gloves and put a towel around my legs, trying to stay warm during the day. And outside it was like 104 degrees, it was boiling hot.
Mm-hmm.
Really beautiful day in the summer. And EPCOT was being worked on every pavilion. And a lot of times we all like to go out at lunchtime and just sit outside in the hot sun and just kind of soak up the sun while we ate our lunch, just so that we're in a nice warm, area, because we're so sick of being in the freezing cold air conditioning for hours. And plus, we kind of would like to see, what's going on with all the construction sites, kind of would watch them. But something that happened quite often is that every now and then, the construction workers, and I don't know which ones, they're never Disney employees. I promise you that. I'm pretty sure they would light the porta potties on fire. And the porta potty would go up in this huge thing of black smoke. It really looked awful, like just billowing smoke. The fire department would come and they put it out. They always had a row of about 10 porta potties at every pavilion, right? And every week, somebody would light one of those on fire. Well, anyway, this day we went out there and we're soaking up the sun. And we had our lunch, and everyone was kind of laying there relaxing. And this one guy who worked for our group, he wasn't in our department, but he kind of helped out with the cabinets and the cards and stuff like that. He went to use a porta potty, just like all of us did, right? Yeah. And we'll call him Melvin. That's not his real name, but for this, because I don't want to embarrass him anymore. But
for the sake of discussion,
poor Melvin, he goes over the porta potty. And he takes a very middle one, right? And we saw him go in there, didn't think anything of it. A few minutes go by, and all of a sudden we see the porta potty on the left side of his on fire, right? And everyone goes, "Hey, there's a fire. The porta potty's on fire." And all of a sudden, the one on the right side of him is on fire. No, and he's in the one in between the two of them. And they're both on fire. And it's just a big giant fireball and just black smoke billowing up. And we're all screaming and yelling, and Melvin, get out of there, Melvin, get out, And suddenly the door opens up and he has his pants all the way down to his shoes. And he's trying to get out of there with no clothes on, running for his life, trying not to get burned. And we were all cracking up laughing, but it's like, it was the most horrible sight. And I felt so sorry for the guy. He didn't get burned, but they lost 3 or 4 porta potties that day because then they spread to all the other ones.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. And, but anyway, it was, I guess you had to be there for that one. Anyway.
Only at EPCOT.
Yeah. But that's what EPCOT was like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Be thinking about that one for a while. Well, yeah, I mean, this was such a massive construction process. Everything was running behind. You guys were working nonstop. I mean, you've talked about like working in the middle of the night, working all the time, taking these naps and everything. I mean, just what was life like on that construction site?
I didn't see it as a problem. It was always interesting.
Yeah.
They didn't want us using the bathrooms, even though they had finished the bathrooms, because they were afraid the construction workers would just write graffiti all over them and
or set them on fire.
And or do something. So they were upset that they couldn't use the real bathrooms because they were done. They were like some of the first things done. But you could see some pavilions being built faster than others. We were just curious, like everybody else. Like you'd want to sneak over and go walk through and see what's at the Imagination Pavilion, and we'd go over and see Doug Griffith, who was the other animator, and he'd be over working on the Imagination Pavilion or Spaceship Earth. I did do some figures in Spaceship Earth. There was Leonardo da Vinci with the guy with the kite I had to do, and the printing press scene and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't anything, to write home to mom about. But it was horrible walking up those stairs with the Anacon and equipment just to program it and move all that equipment. And whenever you had to move all the equipment in the Anacon up and down stairs, we really hated that.
I bet.
And we kind of learned our lesson, down the road. They eventually had Steve Silverstein, his nickname Mouse, they worked on a smaller Anacon, this little gray one, that was much lighter in weight and easier to transport when you had to go up and down stairs. Because a show like Big Thunder Railroad or something like that, where you had to go up and down hills and the Anacon with a little tiny folding table, that big heavy Anacon was just a nightmare to work with. And I actually threw out my back and hurt it really bad once trying to move the Anacon in Pirates in the Caribbean and in Paris, because I couldn't get Eric Swap to help me that day. He was busy with other stuff, and he thought I could handle it myself, I guess. But it turns out I couldn't it was a really tight spot, and I was trying to program the sword fighters over there.
Mm-hmm.
I had to reprogram them. Doug Griffith actually programmed the sword fighters fighting. It was my idea, and I came up with the scene. It was one of my ideas, and I thought it was possible to do this. But unfortunately, somebody gave the wrong direction to Doug, saying, well, let the swords really hit. But I didn't want them to hit. We were just going to lay a soundtrack on there to make it sound like they were hitting, because we didn't want them constantly hitting and then breaking the arms and breaking all the mechanics inside. So it's better to just give the illusion that they're hitting and just film it and then lay down a soundtrack as if the clean sounds of the swords actually hitting. Mm-hmm. We actually changed the swords from thick pirate swords to the real thin swords, because the thick pirate ones, even though we made them aluminum, they're just too heavy. And but anyway, I had to reprogram it so that they didn't hit. It took me a month to try and fix that. Of going in there after working all day everywhere else, and I had to then go in at night after I did my normal job, programming on Imagineering or whatever they called it, and we'll go in and try and set this up. But the water was in there, so because the water was in there, I couldn't set the Anacon and the table in the trough where the water was, right? Because the boats are recycling boats there. So I had to put it in the rockwork directly across the water. And it's just a really tight fit. And I leaned over to set the Anacon down, and I was leaning over so far that my back just snapped and right there. And yeah, I actually dropped the Anacon, but it landed on the table and it didn't hurt it. But yeah, I was really in a lot of pain for like a couple of months, but I kept working. But it's like you hated to deal with stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, that pirate's effect is so. I remember the first time I saw film of that when the park opened, and I was like, now we're really cooking. Now we're really doing some cool stuff, because that was such a great effect.
I came up with several ideas. I came up with the pirate swinging on the rope, and I tried to come up with some new ideas and effects that would really blow everybody away. The problem was they were really expensive, the sword fighter, and it kept breaking down, and nobody else wanted to put it in their pirate ride. But it was when it was working, it just was really cool.
Yeah,
really cool. I remember showing the video to Mickey Steinberg, and when I got back from Florida after Doug was just programming it, because they were mocking up everything in a Florida warehouse and programming it there. And I showed Mickey Steinberg, and he was just so blown away, and he just had to show it to everybody. But I remember before that meeting, him yelling at me, saying I spent too much money on it. And then after I showed him the video, he didn't yell at me anymore about it. He didn't complain about it. So
it was all going into the show.
Reverse.
Yeah.
I got yelled at and scolded a lot for being over budget. I got constantly in trouble for that, you know, because I was in this position of chief animation producer where I took Wathel Rogers' job, basically, you know, after he retired and moved. And Tony wanted me to fill in for him and make sure the figures are built right for Euro, Disneyland, and Star Tours and Splash and all of that. And I was probably the right person for the job, but I wasn't good at arguing with Mickey Steinberg and the budget people over the money. I was not good at that, because they were constantly like, "Yeah, no, you can't spend that. That's too much money." That dragon, the dragon in the castle in Euro Disneyland, it originally only had two functions, and they were both digital, a tail and a mouth. And it was just awful. I mean, it was a complete disaster. And Tom Morris had said, "Hey, you know, Davy, put the functions in you need, figure it out, you direct it." Right? I go, okay, but I don't think they're going to let me have the money for this, but I'll try. And Tony got behind Tom and said, yeah, Dave, just whatever you think it needs, you do it. So I changed all the functions and I put a whole bunch of functions in it, add a flexible neck to it. And we got it all in. And the budget guy showed up and I was like 350,000 over budget or something ridiculous. And Mickey just yelled at me and screamed at me and just was furious. And right in front of the dragon, and all the Maple guys could see me being yelled at and scolded for being over budget. And Mickey would go, now you cut something out of here right now. I want you to cut something out of this show, right? You spent too much money. You cut something out. He says, cut off the wings. What does a dragon need with wings? Cut those wings off. I go, I can't cut the wings off. They're already made. It'll cost me more money to cut them off.
Right.
Well, cut off the tail. What does the dragon need with a tail? Dragons don't need tails. Cut that tail off. That'll save me, 50,000. I go, the tail's already on. It's already finished. It's like, it'll cost more money to cut it off. And then he'd get really mad at me and be spitting in my face and just go, well, cut something else off. Cut something out of the show. It's like, you're spending too much money. He says, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll cut out some special effects, these dripping water effects, all right? And the budget guy was standing right there, and he's looking at it, and he said, okay, that'll save us so much money. He says, what else? And I says, okay, all these work lights, we don't need those. Like, cut all those work lights. And he goes, oh, yeah, that'll save us a lot. Yeah, he looks at it, says, okay, great. It's like, Mickey was then happy. He's like, okay. And so then he left because I cut out a couple things, right?
Yeah.
Well, turns out I needed all that stuff, right? But I didn't tell him. So when we got to Euro Disneyland and started installing the figure, and I had to go in and program it, we didn't have any work lights. So I had some of the maintenance guys go over to Pirates at night and break in there, and we stole their work lights and took the dragon, and then the pirate crew had to buy all new work lights because we stole them. So that's how that worked.
That's using your head.
There you go. I had to get it in my budget somehow. So
it always requires creativity.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about Universe of Energy because that was a show that had a lot of physical effects. You've talked about like working around water. Well, that show had water effects. That show had lava effects. That show had kind of everything. Did that affect like how you did your work? I mean, I would imagine putting animatronics in where it's raining is slightly more difficult, I would guess.
Yes. What's weird is because I worked right next to special effects and I knew all the special effects guys, we'd have lunch and they were all showing me their effects all the time. And hey, what's your opinion? Come over here and look at the fire effect we created and the volcano effect, Mm-hmm. And yeah, Davey, you got to program all this, right? It was always looked so much better at the WDI building where they mocked it up. And it was just a little bit disappointed when we went to the Energy Pavilion and actually was there. And I don't know why it lost a little bit, even though it all worked the same and so forth, but we kind of lost some of it. And I think it had to do with that just big flat cement floor that looked like a football field rather than being in this cozy little dinosaur world.
Yeah.
But they're all great effects. The special effects crew were just fantastic. I mean, they're so clever. And, how they came up with stuff. I couldn't even believe how they even invented some of these ideas. They were just way ahead of their time. And the one thing I was really disappointed is after EPCOT was all done, they laid all those guys off, or they quit and did their own thing. And
yeah,
I know Mark and the guys who did Weta, the water fountains and so forth, started their own company. But man, those guys were just super, super talented. And I remember when I started working on Splash and the Hopping Rabbit, I said, oh my God, I need all those guys back here because I need their help to help me show me how to do the Hopping Rabbit and hide the bar and how to hide the effects so that it doesn't show the mechanism underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I had no one to go to. They didn't have a special effects department then.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, they lost all their really good talent.
Because it was so impressive, all that. Who art directed the Energy show?
Wathel was my director on it, right? And he's the one I went to all the time. So I don't know if he was just in charge of it, but that's who I constantly dealt with.
Oh, okay.
And I had to show all the figures. I came up with some ideas, and I wanted to change. I wanted to do some splash water effects in the water as the dinosaur was moving.
Mm-hmm.
He got really mad. I said, no, we can't add anything new now, right?
Right.
We're over budget on everything that costs more money. We can't go over budget. And it was that same principle that he had to deal with that I had to deal with, is like, you can't add stuff and go over budget. And I didn't realize it then, because I thought, oh, this is a really good idea and it'll be easy. And the effects guys are going, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, no problem. And he's going, no, you're not doing it.
Uh-huh.
Not adding a water effect in here, because he knew that he can't go over budget.
Mm-hmm. Or that they were already probably over budget to begin with. Yeah. Were you there for the park opening, Epcot?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like?
The last few days, it was a mad dash to get everything done.
Mm-hmm.
Things. And the little things were like, was it the China Pavilion where they had to paint all the ceiling? They had like a zillion artists in there on scaffolding trying to finish it, and they didn't finish it. But they were working 24 hours a day trying to paint every little detail, up on the ceiling, laying upside down on scaffolding. And then everywhere there was cement had to be poured. And the construction workers would come by and step in the cement, and then they have to dig it all out the next day and redo it. And that was constantly a problem. And you had to really be on your ball as for where you were walking at night and not walk in a wet cement. Even though they put up barricades and stuff, people would just knock the barricades over and just walk through the wet cement. They seemed to not care. And working there, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to step in wet cement. I know it's out there somewhere. And every now and then you'd come across it. Some big slab that was dirt the other day, and all of a sudden it's all wet cement and it's not dry. You can't walk on it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was constant.
Well, I would imagine that you didn't get much of a chance to enjoy the festivities, considering you were just burning the midnight oil, squashing bugs,
Yeah, there were a lot of fireworks and stuff like that, and hoopla. And the press had a thing where there's like 80 press people walking through, and they're showing them around everywhere. And but those were usually, I'll tell you a funny little story is, I was really young looking, when I was doing Epcot, in my 20s. And my hair was long, a little longer than what it is now. And so I didn't fit the Disney clean cut image that Wathel Rogers or Mark Davis or, those people had.
Mm-hmm.
But Wathel didn't program any of the figures. He didn't even know how to use the Anaconda. He'd been away for so long, he didn't remember how any of the buttons worked.
Oh, wow.
And, but they wanted Wathel to always do the press interviews, and I was not to do any press interviews whatsoever. But so they wanted Wathel to look like he did all the programming, right, for every show.
Uh-huh.
So we would be in World of Motion, and we'd have to set up the Anaconda with a little black Dubatine table, covering on it, so it looked nice. And we set up the Anaconda and all the equipment, and we turn it on and run it. And I would then have to show Wathel how it worked, which seems so bizarre because he was like my boss. I thought he would know.
Yeah.
And he just forgotten everything. And well, anyway, the press would then want to have him program live on camera, right? Well, it turns out he didn't know where all the buttons were and how to reset it, right? So they had me hide underneath the table, and I would reach up under the black cloth and reach up to the buttons and reset everything without even looking at it, memorizing, knowing where all the buttons were, and move it for him. So they would make it look like that's his hand, but actually one of my hands was mine, and the other hand was his.
Oh, wow.
So we had to do that a few times, and just being sneaky about it. I just hide under the table and run it from there.
I'll have to go back and look at the tape, see if I can tell where your hands are. That's something else.
Yeah, we made fun of that afterwards. I mean, Eric Swap, he was always cracking jokes. He was always just a character. And one day there was this guy that was taller than me. I'm pretty tall, 6'5", and he was taller than me. And he was an African-American guy and construction guy. And hard hat, and the orange vest and everything, and I'm not sure what he did in the construction group, but we liked him, we kind of became friends with him. So we were trying to get him to be in on one of the scenes in the shows, just so we could get him in on TV, And we made fun. It's like, look, anyone can be an animator. Look, Wade can be an animator. It's like, I don't remember the guy's name, and we'd say his name. So he can be an animator too. It's like, yeah, we put him in the scene. So we're trying to be nice to this guy and help him out, and just because he didn't get any glory, and some people deserved it.
Yeah.
Can I tell one more story, or?
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, when I was working on Pirates of the Caribbean down at Disneyland, right? I was the director for the rehab, and it had gone downhill and hadn't been taken very good care of, and SQS and I and stuff, we really tried to really embellish it and want to fix it up. And so because I complained and so forth, we got the money and the funding to fix it up and do a complete rehab. And I got to reprogram some of the figures and so we had about 2 weeks in there to fix it. Well, the last figure I had to program was the auctioneer. I was doing that whole scene. I programmed everything, and I was trying to do it all in one night, which is really hard. And the auctioneer is a 1 minute soundtrack that repeats every minute. And that's a difficult figure to program to get it right, but I had plenty of practice on it. And so I had to program that straight through the night till 8 in the morning. And right at 8 in the morning, I finished. I got all done. And they immediately want to kick me out because they're opening the ride for the public in an hour. So they started packing up all the equipment, and they downloaded the figures so it played back automatically doing its cycle. And I decided, I was delirious. I was so tired. I was like, I hadn't had any sleep in 24 hours. I just had gone all out trying to get everything finished. And I wanted to go across the bridge to the other side and look at the whole auction scene over where the boat is. Mm-hmm. Right? And right when I'm walking over there, the ride operator announces, okay, the work lights are coming off. We're running the vehicles. Work lights going off now. And all of a sudden, everything just went dark. My eyes just weren't adjusted to no work lights. Mm-hmm. I was working with work lights, and anyway, I took a step the wrong way and I fell in the water. Oh, no. But I fell right where the boat is, because I was right on the rock path right next to the water, and there's a little angle where suddenly it's not straight anymore. It changes.
Mm-hmm.
Right where that angle is where I kept going straight where rather than turn. And I stepped in the water in between the boat, and I got stuck in between the boat, under the boat, in the water, and was literally drowning.
Oh, no.
And all the guys on the other side saw what happened, right? And they heard the big splash. They probably yelled or whatever, but they all ran across the bridge. They all came over, and they're trying to reach down into the water in between the boat. And they pulled me out, and my leg was really cut up, really, really badly, because it got caught in between the boat and the rock wall.
Uh-huh.
And it really tore off a lot of the skin. But yeah, they pulled me out, and I was really embarrassed about it. But I didn't go to the nurse's office, and I should have, because that water and the algae and stuff is probably not good, safe.
No.
But yeah, that was I almost killed myself that day. So
what we have learned between pirate boats and burning porta potties and falling asleep next to the stage, this is a dangerous profession.
it is, yeah.
Well, we're glad you made it out the other side okay.
Well, next time I have other stories, I'll tell you, but on Lincoln and Splash and Bear Band.
And that wraps up part 1 of our interview with Mr. Davy Feiten. Jeff, as I said at the start of the episode, what a career.
Incredible. And I mean, yeah, I felt some kindred spirit with him when he was talking, likening it to a recording studio. It does seem very similar, the kind of amount of concentration and focus it requires. I mean, I wish I could sit down with him and watch him do it in person. It seems so fascinating. All the methods he's come up with through the years, and just all the things he was involved with, and kind of the fingers out into other disciplines it provides for you, into other worlds of, animation and lighting and staging and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was fascinated to hear him describe that. And I too wish I could just watch him program something, because I think that would be really fascinating to see. And I had not thought about, the comparisons to, the work you do in his studio. It's very deliberate, meticulous work, and you get really annoyed with people coming in asking you to make things tap dance.
Yeah, and the break of the focus, that tap dancing story was so funny. It cracked me up. But
yeah, I'm sure you've had a few instances of people like that over the years.
Yes, maybe. Perhaps I have.
Yeah, so I'd really like to thank Davey for joining us. We'll have him back.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, my gosh, we've only begun to scratch the surface of the projects that he's worked on.
Yeah, so many. I mean, we, as he was talking about, you would see Wathel Rogers, and Wathel Rogers was so instrumental in the classic Walt period. But he was there for so long and involved in so many things. Davey was just quite the legacy of his own. So.
Absolutely. It also made me really wish there was a book or documentary or something about that crew at CalArts that came to Disney, because Waking Sleeping Beauty covers that period, but doesn't specifically focus on it. But I would love just something specifically about that early 80s period when all those people came to Disney, and it was like the young guys cutting up and the old guys kind of like keeping an eye on them. And, all those weird things that Tim Burton did for Disney Channel, and just all these little projects they were all working on, like when they were working on like Brave Little Toaster and things like that. All that period is so fascinating to me.
It is. What a credit to Disney that they had them in there, and these, I don't know. It's just, there needs to be more on it because, the array of talent and where they all ended up. And a lot of them ended up coming back to Disney in some form or another, which is the fascinating part.
Yeah, it's like Disney wasn't ready for them at that time, but then later, thankfully, a lot of them came back. And
Yeah.
So yeah, just as a complete aside from all the animatronic stuff, that's really fascinating to me. So,
well, Michael, I've been enjoying. We just did a live stream about Easter and Easter parades for our Patreon people. It's always fun doing these extra monthly live streams for the people who help support our podcast, don't you think?
oh, absolutely, it is a highlight. And yeah, that was a fun one. That opened my eyes to a few things that I had never seen before.
Pretty wild, yeah.
Like a whole new universe of things for me to explore now. So that was a lot of fun. And yes, we welcome our Patreon backers who make this show possible every month. We really appreciate it. And in exchange, they get, a packet of Progress City swag, some access to some special audio, and at a certain level, the monthly live stream where we all get together, have a good time, see some rare video or photos, or just hang out with a good bunch of people and have some fun.
It's true. Yeah. So thanks to all of you who already support us in that fashion. And thanks to everybody who just listens alone, but consider
Absolutely.
signing up for that extra content.
Yes, you can join us at patreon.com/Progress City USA, and your contributions are tax deductible. So that's fun. It's tax season.
It is. It is. Well, you can also get in touch with us at podcast@progresscityusa.com on email. Twitter, Michael is at Progress City USA, and I am at Jeff G. Crawford. And Michael, what are we going to talk about next time?
Well, next time, we hope to have more with Davy Feiten about all sorts of things. We've still got to go around the world. We've still got to talk about country bears. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll have more with Davy Feiten for next time.
Okay. Well, stay tuned for part 2 with Davy Feiten. We'll look forward to seeing you then. So long, everybody.